Hello everyone and welcome to this session of the EAGE, local chapter of Stavanger. For us, it's a pleasure to have in today Ashley Russell. She will present her journey from data science and yoga, reflections on 5 years in an energy company. Ashley currently is a leader data science and analytics in the Subsurface team at Equinor. Some technical information about the meeting. The meeting it's going to be recorded, as I mentioned before, and later on will be posted on the EAGE YouTube channel, so everyone can have a look or access or to share with friends, people, and then we will have at the end of the presentation a Q&A session. So feel free to share your ideas, queries, everything that Ashley will be really happy to answer or to share or to discuss. And so we will open up the floor for the questions at the end. And you can write it down in the chat box, that's fine. But if you feel comfortable, you can also raise your hand and open the mic to ask the question. So then I will leave the virtual floor to Ashley. Ashley, thank you very much to be here today. If you want, you can start sharing your screen.
Yep. Thanks, Josephina. So thanks for inviting me. I realized actually when I sent in the title for this talk, I said reflecting on 5 years in an energy company. But now when I was actually going back through and putting this together, I realized it's actually been 7. And I was like, wait, where did those 2 years go? Oh yeah, that's right, COVID, right? I completely have just like forgotten about 2020 and 2021 apparently. Anyway, as Josephine has already mentioned, I work for Equinor. I'm based here in Stavanger. I'm going to share a little bit about my history. As you can tell, I'm not Norwegian, and talk a bit about my career development through this talk. I have an American flag up on the screen. I am American. I have been living in Norway for almost 5 years. And even though my job title is in data science, I have a master's degree in geology. So that's quite a change, and I'll be talking about that today. And today I would really actually consider myself a data scientist over a geologist, just due to the sort of experiences and the projects that I've been involved in. Today I'm actually in the leadership position. So I have the responsibility in Equinor, in the Subsurface organization, for the implementation of data science and everything we do in Subsurface. That's a huge task. Now, if you don't know what data science is, you interact with it every day. If you have lane sensors in your car, picking a TV show to watch on Netflix, face recognition to sign into your iPhone or into your laptop, this is data science in practice happening all around you. There are many different definitions for data science as sort of a discipline out there, but I use a quite simple one. It's the science of using data to help someone make a choice. And yeah, Lord knows we can all use help in making choices in what we do in our day-to-day lives. Now, one of the common methods, right, that I get to work with and have a lot of use in my team is something called machine learning, probably something you've heard of. It can be a bit of a buzzword, right? It's really just a set of methods and algorithms, but we also use a lot of statistics, data visualization and analysis, and a lot of scripting, so a lot of code as well. Now, I've entitled this talk Data Science and Yoga, and you might think that's a little weird. I think I'm going to show it makes total sense. I'm not a huge yogi, I'll be honest. I'm actually a big-time runner, but I often do incorporate a yoga session into my weeks of heavy training, and there's some important reasons for that. But yoga, for those of you who have done yoga before, it's about many things, but includes working on flexibility and literally stretching yourself. And I think this is a pretty appropriate metaphor for my career so far, about being flexible in the opportunities that are offered, stretching your skills or getting out of sort of the box you might think that you belong in, and also knowing when to be a little more resistant and a little more non-flexible. So I'm going to talk quite a bit about how one changes career trajectories, right? I've gone from geosciences. I've had a really actually crazy career development. Moving across the world, right? From the US to Stavanger. But I hope it helps you guys, wherever you are in your career, in your studies, in your life, reflect on where you are, where you're going, and how much flexibility is appropriate for where you are today. I'm going to share some key reflections and lessons, some hard ones I've learned from geology, from data science, and also from leadership. Okay, but I want to show one thing that really describes who I am. So I've given you a typical introduction to myself, but this is a famous tweet. There are two types of people in the world, right? And one has the perfect email inbox with no unread messages. And then the other person has, in this case, 13,678 messages that they've been somehow able to ignore. Okay, so here's my phone. And yes, 165,388 unread messages in my email inbox, just so you can get to know me. But what does this indicate? There's actually been quite a bit of scientific research into this exact tweet. If you Google it, it's fantastic. But it's something important to me. If it's important, I will follow up on it immediately. Otherwise, I may never read it at all. It's very much a description of my personality. I have a pretty good capability to put away distractions and not have them bother me. This comes to the downside as well, right? Because sometimes I miss stuff. And that means I really rely on other people in my team, my colleagues, my family to help me with reminding me of things because I sometimes will just miss it. Okay. Secondly, I'm a strong red-yellow in Berkman colors. If you haven't done a Berkman colors test, I highly recommend it. I have a tendency to jump into things, but I'm also quite a bit yellow, which means I'm quite analytical, which probably hints at why I moved into data science in the first place. But the key point here is a bit of a disclaimer. The sort of career paths, the decisions I've made here, the choices I've taken have worked for me. They might not necessarily work for you. For example, not everyone is a great coder or understands it well, right? I wish there was a magic formula I could give people for the first 10 years of your career, but there isn't. I'll give you a few tips along the way. Maybe the first one being here. If you haven't done some type of personality test, I highly recommend it, not only for reflecting on yourself, but also helping you understand how others in your life may communicate and act a bit differently. So that's the one disclaimer I want to start with. So we're going to begin about 5 years ago. I get asked often how I ended up in Norway. And I usually reply, I got really lucky. Now, both my husband and I were moved by our respective companies from Houston, Texas, right, to Stavanger in 2018. And both of us have decided to stay for the long term. It's pretty lucky that we got that figured out. But actually doing a little bit of research, and this is actually viral on TikTok right now, there is some underlying science to it. So this guy, Dr. Richard Weissman, he's a professor of psychology in the UK. And his area of study is on things like illusion, deception, and luck. But yeah, I saw this on TikTok and I was like, oh, this actually makes quite a lot of sense in this presentation. So what is it that makes someone lucky? So this guy, he studied a bunch of different people from different walks of life, studied them for many years, and asked them, do you consider yourself a lucky person? And he actually found there were 4 main traits that stood out for people who answered yes, they did feel like they were lucky. First is that they leap at opportunities. Yeah, that's very much going to be what we're going to talk about quite a bit today. Second, they listen to their intuition. I will bring up one particular reflection around this as well. They're optimists. If you can tell, I'm a very happy, optimistic person. And I think that also makes you look at the bright side of things when you are given perhaps a project or a task or a new career job that you're like, I'm not sure about this. Being an optimist will help you see it through. And last but not least, they're resilient. So we're going to hit on a couple of these points today. The first one may be coming, the fourth one may be coming first. Okay. Any guesses what this graph is? If any of you are petroleum or have worked in oil and gas, this probably looks familiar. Yeah, this is the price of Brent in USD over the past 20 years, right? If any of you are in school now, right? Like now and today, I had a pretty comfortable academic program. Good funding coming into the department, right? Plentiful internship opportunities. It was good times, right, to be a geology major. So I finished my master's degree in geology, went to University of Wisconsin, but I should have seen a sign about my future when I'd handed in my master's thesis. So my master's thesis was 291 pages long. It had 90 pages of actual text, and yes, 201 pages of data tables. So clearly I was comfortable early on with data acquisition, uncertainty analysis, and quite a bit of statistical analysis. And I didn't really get it then, I didn't realize it then, but I really enjoyed working with data to draw possible conclusions to unknowns in geology in my particular case. I was looking at sort of improbable density inversions in high pressure metamorphic subduction zones. So, but using data to do this. But anyway, let's keep going up in time. Literally, by luck again, I found myself attending a career fair. You can see the oil price at this time. It was, people were recruiting left and right. I attended a career fair and walked away with a job offer within 3 hours. As coming off a master's degree, being pretty poor, you're just like, oh wow, I'm going to get paid to do something. I took it. I took a leap after really not knowing what I was getting into, and I actually started at Schlumberger. This is a big leap for me. I thought that I would be running analysis labs at universities for the rest of my life, right? But the prospect of this was just too good. I was like, I'm young, what do I have to lose here? And of course, companies are hiring like crazy. Yeah, so totally went to it. And Schlumberger gave me a super solid and very tough, I don't know if Surrender's here, introduction to the oil and gas industry, right? From petrophysics to reservoir modeling. But there was one thing that I actually was really good at, and it was this thing. It's okay if you don't know what this is, but it's this thing called the workflow editor in Petrel. It's like a semi-programming language that's like for geologists, essentially. But this was my first introduction to automation as a concept and some type of programming, right? I never had that in school. So before I knew it, I was being asked to teach this workflow editor thing to other people, which maybe was one of the first glimpses of leadership, or at least some mentorship, right? So I know some of you are students. If you get asked to teach classes, yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's super valuable experience, especially at a young age, to understand and sort of, develop those teaching and mentorship skills. All right, and then we all know what happened about 2014, 2015. I was hired by Statoil at the time, just as the oil price was taking a big old dive. And this was a tough time in Houston. I don't know if you have friends or family members or colleagues who've been through this. I'm not sure how many of you in Stavanger were involved in this, but this was really hard times and sad times for a lot of me and my friends and colleagues. And we were young, right? We were in our 20s, and this was brutal for us, right? So I came into Statoil as a graduate, and I was hired as a data manager. I had no idea what a data manager was. I was terrified. I knew geology, though, and I knew I could help the team doing data management who lacked a geoscientist. Again, with the sort of literal world falling down in the city of Houston, I went for it. I don't know what data management is, but I'm going to go for it. I'm going to work for Statoil. I think they're a great company with good values, and yeah, I'm going to try to hold on here. This was a pretty big defining moment for me, because it was clear that if I was not only going to survive but flourish in a career, I had to think differently, I had to be a bit flexible, and have the capability to put on several different hats depending on the market. We're kidding ourselves if we don't think we live in a global economy. You will always be tied to that in some way. Of course, in commodities, it's a little more brutal, perhaps, than others. But I'm reflecting on this today because at this point in time, there were a lot of geology school friends I had who, in their early 20s, essentially the starts of their careers in geology, who just left point blank. And a lot of them actually went to pursue full-time careers in data science. A lot of them are working today in Silicon Valley or Austin, Texas, doing very different things than geology. And for me, I also decided to kind of go down that road. And I reflect a bit about this sort of history I'm showing on the slide that made that possible. It was critical thinking, scientific methods, statistics, math, physics, chemistry. Geology comes into play with understanding of all these things, right? Understanding how laws of physics play out in the natural world. But you could make the point that getting a geology degree was not perhaps the important part. It was those capabilities to learn some of those things, statistics, uncertainties, physics. And these are translatable in a lot of different places, a lot of different industries. All right. Now, you have to remember at my start in Statoil, right? So now we're getting really into the Equinor bit here. I was hired as a data manager, and I learned very quickly that meant I was going to be responsible for moving subsurface data around for the Gulf of Mexico. Now, because I was still quite young, I went through what's called a graduate program. And many energy companies have this as sort of your first 3 years. You get to rotate, look at different things, take field trips, this sort of stuff. This is an EAG talk, so I've got to show some rocks. Here they are. This is a base of a turbidite sequence in the Ainsa Basin in Spain. And this was the big field trip that we got in Equinor in the end of the graduate program, and you were challenged to think across different disciplines. You've got some reservoir engineers in there, petroleum engineers, geophysicists, right? And you're encouraged to think together. You know, how do you look at reservoir properties with this? How would fluid flow through this type of system? You know, how would production work, you know, using these outcrops as analogs? Now, we had a very experienced geologist leading this trip. And he asked me, of course, we're taking a look at this beautiful outcrop here. And he goes and asks the questions, hey, Ashley, what should I look for at the base of this turbidite to interpret direction of flow? For any of those who know what turbidites are, the answer, of course, is flute casts, which are actually fantastically preserved in this particular outcrop, hence why it's a quite famous place to visit. And, you know, I showed the leader of this trip, a nice flute cast and indicated direction of flow. And I was told very clearly, I was wrong. And I knew I was right. And, you know, I was reflecting with a friend actually about this exact experience just last weekend. And it was a very distinct understanding that because I had a title of data manager on the field trip roster, that I was treated quite differently. I was apologized to, don't get me wrong, but only after another geologist gave the same answer as me. And this is a lesson in leadership, to be honest. And it was painfully learned. And as a graduate, you know, someone in their 20s, it was quite hurtful. And I promised that this is something that I would take with me and I would never do to another. So don't make assumptions, right, about the competence of a person based on their title. We're in a new generation where generalists are quite common, right? And career shifts are actually quite encouraged. So someone may actually have great competence from a particular area that you might not know. And the second one, very importantly, and the leader in this position did the right thing. He did apologize to me. Apologize when you do make an assumption about someone. And this is something I've also had to do as a leader. It hurts and it's hard, but it's the right thing to do. Finally, a lesson maybe in this story in biases for us. Do we treat those today with a data discipline, take a data manager, a data engineer, a data scientist? Do we treat them with less respect? I was certainly given that message at a young age. And if you're working with young people, right, your words as a leader carry a lot of weight and shape our opinions quite early. So this reflection actually, and this experience feeds into a very strong belief that I have that cross-disciplinary teams, especially for things that are quite complex like the subsurface, which is very predictive business in itself, cross-disciplinary also means you're data specialists. And also you can incorporate, for example, information technology. And not just as paper pushers or ticket jockeys, right? But to be treated as critical thinkers alongside your geoscientists, alongside your reservoir engineers. And I think this will become more and more important as data analysis and data science become parts of our day-to-day workflows, much like they have in our day-to-day life. All right. Now, in the summer of 2016, I remember going to my boss to ask for some training. When you're a young person, this can be a bit intimidating, especially when the Brent oil price was around $30 a barrel. And I remember I was working right in data management, and I kept thinking, there has got to be a better way to do some of these tasks I'm doing. There has got to be a better way. I remember I had that little like workflow editor, Petrel automation experience, and like, this is something maybe I can do a little bit more with. So I'd heard about this coding language that was being used all over, a lot of friends all over the world, called Python. And I had a friend at work who was doing a bunch of research stuff and loved technology. Like, this guy has got like 30 3D printers in his garage, right? And he's like, Ashley, you should learn this. Like, this would be good for you. Okay. I was already getting pretty good with like some dashboarding tools, and I thought, yeah, I could use something like Python to try to automate some boring parts of my job. And maybe that will help me with collecting data for doing better dashboarding. So I looked online and I found a course called Python for Everybody. I remember it being $200, right, for this Coursera certificate. But the thing I liked the most is I had a project-based capstone requirement. You had to do a project at the end to get the certification, meaning I could challenge myself and actually do a small project to see if I really learned. And I took this proposal to my boss, who had no idea what I was talking about. And he said, okay, I agree, but you need to prove that this Python stuff works for something in your job. So every Friday afternoon for 3 months in 2016, I learned Python. And I'm not kidding you. I had to start at the real basics. Like, I could not have told you this picture on the left of like how a computer works. Yeah, I could have not told you that technically, right? I had to start from there. And of course, learn things like syntax, lists, dictionaries, loops, eventually into things like APIs, JSON, data frames, word processing, this type of stuff. And then I came to capstone course. And this is the actual code. I dug it up in the like depths of my OneDrive on the right side. This is the code I used for that capstone, which I had to show my boss that actually did something. And I look at it, I'm like, okay, it's got a function. For any of you who know Python, that's quite good, actually. It's got a lot of commented out lines. Yeah, not surprising. Is it totally legal? I'm not sure, because the point of this was to scrape the file index of the biostratigraphy data, so these are little bugs, right, that we capture from rocks, from the government authority website, from the US government, extract the names of the wells that those bugs came from, and then check our own internal file system in Equinor to see if we were missing that data. And if so, download it and put it in the right place. It worked, and so needless to say, my boss was super impressed, and the whole team began learning Python, because previously we've been doing this by just checking the list on the website manually, one by one. So I have to pause here for one more reflection on leadership again. You know, a big shout out to my boss at the time, who trusted me fully to learn and apply learnings and spend money on me in very tough times. A bit of reflection if you find yourself in the same place one day. Okay, this was sort of Python. When I give other talks, I say it's my gateway drug to data science, because this just opened a whole bunch of opportunities for me. And like I said in my disclaimer in the beginning, it won't work that way for everybody, for sure. But for me, it really allowed me to see a lot of different projects. So I had Python under my belt. I developed really good competence in Power BI and Spotfire. And so I transitioned from doing data management in Equinor to doing data analytics and data science, including a move to Norway to work full-time with a data science team. It opened up so many doors for me to take my career in this direction. And I want to say, coming back to yoga, I've been very lucky to have stretched myself across tasks and projects across the entire what we call analytics spectrum. This is a graphic from Gartner, the sort of background graphic here that showed the different types of analytics that you can essentially work with. And everything from having data engineering projects I was involved in, which has very little data science, but it helps you understand how data is generated so you can do better data science, all the way to decision making with design thinking and agile practices and methodology, some of the soft skills, right? But of course, continuing to develop my Python and machine learning, natural language processing, data visualization. I'll show you some things in a minute. And I want to say, I really want to highlight that I hear it from some people that I mentor today that, oh, I want to do machine learning. I want to do machine learning, and that's the only thing I want to do. But I really advise to try to stretch yourself across the entire data science and analytics spectrum. It will make you a better data scientist. And one of the most important projects on the spectrum that allowed me to grow in that capability was being on that data engineering team. It's a little bit like knowing where your food comes from, right? You have greater appreciation for it if you see how it's actually made and produced. And the same goes with how we prepare data for analytics and for things like machine learning, and how we exist in a much larger system, which I think this graphic shows quite well. So this is another reflection for those of you who are data scientists or aspiring data scientists. We need to communicate our expectations and help our data engineers, and of course data managers are feeding into this as well. Otherwise, we're going to be continuing to waste our time preparing data sets and possibly making either legal or data usage mistakes. So yeah, systematic implementation of analytics, which is of course my current job responsibility, requires systematic work on data. And for us folks from Subsurface, so geoscientists, reservoir engineers, geophysicists, we know we have a lot of data in a lot of formats that is really hard to use, right? I'm going to come back to this in a minute. Okay, so fantastic. Moved to Norway. I get a lot of experience across a lot of different types of projects, from hardcore ML to hardcore data engineering to soft concepts like design thinking. Am I a real data scientist now? Have I reached nirvana? Have I made it? And this is a common discussion for folks like me who have come from a geoscience or geophysics or engineering background and have sort of transformed their career into data science. We don't have a formal degree in it. Are we imposters? Do we suffer from an imposter syndrome? You know, I like this meme here on the left, right? I hope that a degree in natural science is a little bit better than a degree in business analytics. And yes, I did do a Coursera certification, so I laugh a bit at this. I do love making graphs, however, I'm pretty good at it in Python. And I do have a solid background in machine learning. But the reflection I have on this meme is that I learned on the job. I learned by being able to work in a variety and range of projects and tasks and get real experience, right? There's no, to put it this way, in terms of learning data science as a development in my career, it's not some list of courses that I went on. It was really getting involved in many different projects. I've been in a lot of hackathons, and that might seem a little cliche, but actually hackathons have been one of the great ways that I've developed skills. You get to experience a lot of people who are a lot better than you at coding and at machine learning and learn things from them. And you're doing it in a very constructive way where you have to produce a result at the end of that hackathon. You got to do something in 2 or 3 days. It's crazy, it's hectic, it's stressful, but it's fun and you learn something always. And yes, I put a picture of my laptop there, the one I'm talking to you on now. I have stickers on it. I guess that means I'm a data scientist. Although one of them is a rock, so. And this is a little bit of what I love to work on. This is some data visualization in Python. It's just in a Jupyter notebook. You can find some tutorials from me and my friends on Software Underground on our YouTube. This is a cool community of folks who work on the intersection of the geosciences and data sciences. So I've got some tutorials on statistics and data visualization, really designed for geoscientists. But I want to take a quick pause here. I have a few slides left, and now we're going to get into really an important part of my discussion today. I think I have it pretty well covered that having flexibility in work tasks, in my case, taking opportunities across different types of analytics projects, has really given me a good career development so far and allowed me to learn a lot on the job. But when do we need to stand still for a little while? And I'm a huge avid runner. Like, I love running in the mountains everywhere. And there's some debate in the sport if yoga is helpful or harmful for runners. Now the science, I'm quoting Tim Noakes here, quite a famous guy in the sort of anatomy and physiology area for running. He does say that a bit of tightness increases what we call the spring effect in running, allowing for an improvement in ability in the long run. Too much flexibility, and you may get injured, or you may not succeed as fast or with as much endurance as you wish for. So the last part of this talk is on knowing when to focus and stick with something for a while. How do you know when to stay put and focus on one particular project or one particular subject for a bit? So I gave a presentation on data engineering, actually, in Oslo last fall. You can find that one on YouTube, the NDC. And I spoke for an hour on the challenges and solutions on working with geosciences subsurface data. Now, one of the slides I showed in that presentation is a picture of this thing here. This is a tape. I'm assuming many of us in the audience have probably never seen a tape before. I've never seen a tape before. However, a lot of the data we use in Subsurface is in formats optimized for this. Things like Segway, if you've heard of that, or dlist, or even worse, list files, right? So we've had to do a lot of work in the data science community. Really, Software Underground has done a great job here to write Python packages, code that can read and work with stuff designed for this. Anyway, in that presentation, when I showed this particular image, the slide with a tape on it, 99% of that audience had no clue what geology or subsurface was. But when I showed this image, a collective just groan, like rang out throughout the entire room. People just like, what are you doing, right? So never in that moment, it was very clear to me that we have major work to do in this industry. If we are ever going to take advantage of competence of data science, the softwares, the methods, the way of thinking and working, we need to be better with data. So I am today here in a leader role, responsibilities for implementing data science across Subsurface, and I cannot do that without working on this, right? Thankfully, I'm not alone in this, but I do think us as data scientists have an important role to say what we expect. All right. Last point I want to make here. Data science, my discipline, how I sort of, consider myself today, label myself today. It doesn't have it's a bit controversial, to put it that way, in our industry. I have a quote here from a decision maker. I don't believe machine learning, for example, has any place in the oil and gas business. These are real things that have been said to me. So whether it's misinformation, hype, there are real ethical concerns. I understand that, definitely. But I do feel a true purpose in my career today to bring analytical methods, what we call data-driven. It's really just using data, statistics, uncertainty, and modeling that into this business. We are in a period of building trust in analytical methods. So demystifying math and sort of what it means under the word machine learning. It's not a buzzword, I promise. It is real tangible mathematics. It's really about governance, right, and how we play the game in our industry. We can have serious safety and environmental impacts. We know this. Do we use, automatic predictions for things that could have an impact there? There are some real ethical questions here that we need to bring up and discuss. We see ethical dilemmas in self-driving cars, right? Tech companies using iPhone battery life to test things. There are some real ethical questions when it comes to automation and data science. But we have a chance now as professionals to set these boundaries. Also, it's a sort of marketing mindset, building bridges to the external market, showing that the technologies you use outside of work are equally valid for what you do inside of your job or inside of your, academics, right? For example, you're using things like APIs to search airlines, searching for flights through Google Flights, or how data pipelines automate what you're listening to on Spotify, or removing a song you don't like. These things aren't magic. And they're heavily employed technologies across industries. We can use them too. Last, for me, it's about bringing sort of, myself as a data scientist or data analyst, for example, or machine learning engineer, if you want to be really specific, closer to our geoscientists. It comes back to that experience I had, right, way back in INSA, looking at that outcrop in Spain. How do we get closer together so that, you can turn around to the person next to you who's a data scientist and say, hey, could we try doing that with this data, right? How to make that as easy as possible. And I like this graphic on the right. You can find a few different designs of it online, but this is why I will stay to drive data science in Subsurface for a while. I don't plan on leaving for a bit. And to be honest, if I can work on this for the next 30 years, I would be quite happy because I get to see its evolution through. And so maybe that's a bit of a hint of when you find a place to stop for a little while. Last, I believe we are in this sort of phase of trust building in our current very oil and gas dominated energy industry, but it's also a longer term focus than that for me. I firmly believe, you can quote me on this one, that we will not succeed in an energy transition without analytics and without automation, with machine learning being a key automation method, without those things being embraced and encouraged. This is really what's driving my purpose. The world needs the data disciplines. The world needs data scientists, amongst others as well, right? And so here is where I really find that purpose that makes me quite passionate for what I do in my work. It wasn't planned at all, right? I had no idea that I would arrive here if you look at my past. But if you haven't found it yet, keep looking. And maybe that's the hint here. Keep being flexible, keep taking opportunities. And at some point, you will find yourself asked. It'll be by a teacher, a leader, a colleague, a friend. Are you ready to move on yet? You will get this question. Listen to your intuition. Remember the 4 points, right, of being lucky? And sometimes you might have to say, in response to that question, are you ready to move on? You might feel yourself saying, no. I have some unfinished business here that I need to get done. You know you're in the right place if that's your answer. All right, final takeaways. Yeah, there's a balance between when to go for opportunities, be flexible, and when to be a little bit more resistant. But follow your passion, follow your purpose. That will help you with that. You also might find yourself feeling a bit lucky. If you are an aspiring data scientist, take the opportunities to understand the entire ecosystem from data to real decision making. It will pay off for you have a better and more fulfilling career. It's probably no surprise, analytics, data science methods, they're huge right now, right? Embrace them, learn with us, and trust us as professionals to ensure that they are used properly. And last, a point on leadership. If you are a leader, maybe it's in your career path, know your biases, question your biases, and put your faith in someone, especially someone asking to try something new. Last but not least, because I'm a data scientist and I wanted to have a bit of fun at this talk, I wanted to show that this does come from my heart. And since we're talking data science, I asked ChatGPT to come up with the same talk after I'd finished writing it. And it's not bad. It captures sort of the main thesis on flexibility and focus and this sort of thing, but it's pretty darn shallow. So I hope I've been able to get a bit more context, real examples, and lessons that are more of a personal note. So yeah, I think I've hopefully shown you a little bit about how data science has impacted my career, how I'm going to stay here for a while and drive it, because I think it's really one of the keys for unlocking the energy transition. But maybe a last point is, hey, yeah, we can automate a lot of stuff. That's true. But the true ability comes from the combination of machine and us. And at least for the time being, the feeling of purpose is limited to humans. So I leave it at that. Thanks, guys. Open it for questions. Yeah.
Ashley, it was great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for sharing with us all your journey, all the path, the tortuous path that I think most of us have been with. It was put in a really attractive way, how you explain it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yes, of course. Now the mic, you can open the mic or react if you want to ask a question to Ashley, or write it down in the chat box. That's also possible. So feel free to choose whatever you feel more comfortable with.
Promise I won't bite. But you can also catch me on LinkedIn afterward too if you have anything you want to chat about. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hope, when I thought about that title, I'm like, okay, data science and yoga, I think it fits pretty well, right? And the whole thing is like being a runner too. The fact that you can't do too much yoga, otherwise you'll really stab yourself, like you'll get hurt. I thought it was a good thesis, so yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Come on,
you.
guys. Any questions? Any comments? Have any of you tried to code or learn coding? I see Anna's here.
Yeah.
Anyone curious? Yeah.
Thanks for a very, very insightful talk. Actually, the amount of self-reflections that you have shared with us is just tremendous, and I concur with most of the things that you shared about, the inbox, and you see kind of makes you think. So I had to Google a lot throughout your presentation to check all of these sources and whatever quotes you used. But actually, one little question. So you used yoga in this discussion as a metaphor or whatnot. What do you think about running? Running in your career, do you see any parallels there, or is it something?
Oh gosh, actually, there's quite a good parallel there because I am a hardcore runner, like serious hardcore runner. And to be honest, I've had to be a bit flexible as I've gotten older on what kind of running events I do. I'm not so good anymore, actually, as I've gotten older on shorter road competitions. I've gotten slower. It's just a fact of age a bit. But what I have found is new opportunities in running in the mountains. And that comes with moving to Norway, and it comes with really picking up this sort of ultra trail distance, which I love and I have really great passion for. And I think the metaphor sticks here. You will change through life, mentally and physically. And don't take that as a door closing. Take it as another one opening, right? It sounds maybe a bit cliche, but there's always something else. There's always something else. There really is.
Yeah, it's interesting, really, the parallel with the energy transition, digitalization, and all of these transitions in your career, right? And transition, or maybe not full transition, from running to kind of yoga and other types of running. So, I think it's a helpful thing in the career as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. I think another reflection too, because I've been involved a little bit with it in Equinor, is the sort of role of the geoscientist in the energy transition. And what we're seeing is the concepts still apply, of course, especially if you're talking things on carbon capture and storage. It's very geosciences dominated, right? However, the sort of data and digital aspects of it are different. For example, there are requirements that we have to model things out 500 years in the future for carbon capture to ensure that, that you have a proper top seal and you're not leaking CO2 back into the seabed. That requires a ton of computing resources. You cannot do that modeling without a cloud provider, an Amazon or a Google or a Microsoft. You have to have a very close relationship to tech companies for energy transition. And of course, what is the language they speak? Yeah, so it's a big reflection there for me.
Thanks. So actually, maybe a quick question before anyone jumps in. Any recommendations on what not to do on the way of, learning Python or generally data sciences?
Yeah.
Something that you would avoid?
Yeah. I've gone through a few sort of classroom Python courses, and they didn't work well for me. I think of course, like I said in disclaimer in the beginning, it might be related to how I learn and my own personality, but I didn't find the data relatable in these sort of structured courses. I found that actually the range of other students in the course was maybe too wide for me to really have my questions and my, sort of requests and learning points covered. And for me, actually, I know it's really odd, a bit funny, but the Coursera course was fantastic for me because I knew I would have to do a capstone project. I would have to write something myself, ideate to delivery by myself with something I knew. And that is so important, I think. I'm not sure if a classroom Python course is going to give everybody what they want. Yeah, I think that's a big one.
Thanks.
Yes, I wanted to get your opinion for one thing.
Sure.
Is my voice on? Okay. Yeah,
you're good.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. And well, I didn't know your background is geologist and now you're data manager. And like when I heard that, it's very relatable, let's say, for well, my husband's situation right now. So I wanted just, to get your opinion. So my husband, he's also a geologist with 9-year experience. But now he tries to develop skills on data science and he's taking courses and so on. But it's been 3-4 months already. But we get the feeling that like it's really hard to get a job because, as you said, like maybe yes, there is still too much work to do, but there is already people like already graduates with data science degree, with data management skills, like people like yourself with like a skills experience of 6 years, 7 years in data management, data science. So it's really hard. That's the feeling that we get, like to switch at this point, like after having a complete like different experience, switching into data science and then trying to find job. Like, do you feel like there will still be need and I don't know, do you think that's a good idea? And
no, it's a really, really good comment, and I see it as well. It's going to be hard to compete, I think, with a graduate coming out of a really good school with a proper degree in data science. However, I have worked with students before, data science students. They do not know Subsurface, right?
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is actually this mixture of self-taught data scientists coming from a subsurface background with the formally educated data scientists who are fantastic in technology and methods. Putting them together is actually a fantastic combination and one that we prefer, at least speaking for Equinor now. In terms of getting a job, I think I want to pinpoint, my tape slide here. And to be honest with you, you're right. We have a lot of work to do on data. If I come back to the sort of analytics spectrum and, if you remove the sort of logos on the top, you don't get any type of analytics without having really good data foundations. And today, to jump right into predictive analytics across an entire industry, it's not possible. We simply don't have enough projects with good data to do so.
Yes, I agree.
So the advice I can give to you, perhaps, is that the engineering component, the data engineering skills, data governance, legal understanding, there's a lot of work to be done here. And I think a lot of positions actually open and available if you look for that.
Well, myself, I also worked in an energy company, but I mean, I don't know, maybe it's different in Equinor, in other companies, but like it's not very common that they want, let's say, subsurface data scientists or geoscientists with data management skills. It's very few roles, and mostly what I have seen is they hire graduates, and well, that's the feeling I get. Maybe I don't know. How is the conditions in Equinor? Like, is it like, are they willing to hire like people for this position more? Is it getting more and more, or?
Yeah, and I can't speak to that too much. We have separated lines in Equinor.
Okay.
So actual personnel is separated from delivery.
Mm-hmm.
This is just how we're set up. So I'm on the delivery side. So I actually have very little control or knowledge on the people side. So I apologize.
Yeah.
But I do know that we hired quite a few experienced positions last year, and I would expect perhaps that to happen this year as well. Can't tell you for sure, but yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Someone else that want to make a comment or ask something to Ashley? Okay, if not, you can maybe later on contact her, continue the conversation. And we'd like to thank you all for being here today. It's really important for us as a community, and of course, a great and a big thank you to Ashley to being here. It was great, I think, for all of us. And so thank you very much. And I will share with everyone in the chat box the LinkedIn group of the local chapter. Here it goes. Yes. So you can, if you want, you can join us or contact us through LinkedIn, myself or Anastasia or someone else that you find on in LinkedIn. They're doing these hosting events or things in the at the EAG. And if you would like to share also your work, your journey, or whatever you would like to share with the community, we are really open to new discussions and talks. So you are all welcome. And so I think this is the end. Thank you very much to everyone to being here today. And see you next in the next session. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Anastasia.